I'm Sue Wendelgass. I'm the Director of Specialty Training and Programs at Planned Parenthood of Greater New York. And for a couple of years now, I think we're moving into year 3. I've worked under a grant for the AIDS Institute from the New York State Department of Health. And it's all about enhancing the services we can provide for LGBT people in the community, and also for helping communities becoming more welcoming for LGBT persons. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Rachel, ask her to introduce herself and kick us off here.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I can't see you, but I know you're there, and it's so nice to be with you today. As Sue had mentioned, I'm Rachel Marcey, and I'm the LGBT Outreach and Engagement Manager with Planned Parenthood of Greater New York. And Sue and I have been working under the LGBT grant since May of 2019. And as Sue has mentioned, today we're going to be talking about welcoming and affirming communication with LGBTQ plus clients. And we really want to stress the key word today is going to be on communication. So most importantly, why are we doing this? We tend to interact with people based on our own upbringing. What then works for us, we sometimes think works for everyone. This way of thinking can exclude people who may feel that they are different. And if you're the one who feels you're different from what is viewed as the norm, then this may leave you out. And this goes not only for the clients that we work with, but also our coworkers as well. People have told us through trainings and interactions in the community that they've never worked with or met a person who identified as LGBT. Most likely, we know that this is probably not the case. They probably have worked with someone who identified as LGBT, but that person hadn't told that information to them, whether it was because they didn't feel comfortable or whatever the case may have been. There's many reasons why someone may not disclose information. But often LGBT people will not give personal details due to situations that may have happened to them in the past. Some things could include being isolated, talked about, made fun of. Maybe they lost a job or lost housing, lost custody of children even, and sometimes even facing violence. So often we hear with COVID now, out of an abundance of caution, right? And for someone who identifies in the LGBT community, that's sort of the rule of thumb: out of an abundance of caution when it comes to sharing info, better to be safe than sorry. And the other reason it's important to talk about this is that our communities are small and fairly tight knit. And when you establish your reputation as being a safe place or a trusted resource, people will come to you for services. Word will spread. They will say, hey, I had a great experience at this place, or they treated me with, respect. And when that word spreads, people will start coming to you. But on the flip side of that, if you're seen as not being inclusive, not being welcoming, people will not come to you for services. And if they do, they may not be honest with you in order to protect themselves. As providers, we want all people to be safe and comfortable using our services. LGBTQ+. We like to start conversations this way just so that we're all on the same page. So we're just going to briefly define each term. The first 3 terms talk about sexual orientation, or who someone is romantically attracted to. L, lesbian, typically a woman who's attracted to other women. G, gay, used to describe people whose attractions are to people of the same sex. Historically, this has been referred to as a man attracted to another man. However, that is not necessarily the case now. And B, bisexual, being attracted to those of either the same gender and or to those of a different gender. The next term has nothing really to do with sexual orientation or, again, who you're romantically attracted to. It's just how someone views themselves or their gender identity, which is what we're going to talk about in a few minutes. So the T, transgender, is a term for people who do not feel that they identify as the sex they were assigned at birth. Q can stand for questioning or queer. Queer is a term that some people in the community do not like. Historically, it was used to attack people. The term has since been reclaimed with more of kind of like a younger generation, But it's important for us to remember that it's up to the individual to choose how they identify. We should never be making assumptions or labeling people based on our perception of them. Terms can mean different things to different people, and it's personal for them. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as well. So finally, the plus. And because terms are always changing, the plus just lets us be inclusive without constantly changing the acronym or adding letters. You'll see the rainbow flag, which is the pride flag in the LGBT community. And it's one of several flags that we're going to be showing you today. So let's talk a little bit about gender. Often this is called sex on forms and on applications. We all deal with applications and forms pretty much throughout our lives and of course at work. And in the United States, this is assigned at birth, and it's usually either male or female. It's based on a visual inspection of a baby's genitals at birth, and typically it's a binary choice, binary being one or the other, no in between. So this makes the assumption, again, that there's only two genders. But while there have been some states and localities changing this, overall, it still remains one or the other, male or female, on a birth certificate. Again, binary only lets you choose one. It's like a test we might have taken in school where you only have a true or a false option. There's no room for anyone who identifies as anything different or something in between, or what's traditionally considered the norm. So then we have to talk about non-binary. So binary, again, one or the other, male, female, nothing in between, no options. So binary, it allows people to kind of allow themselves to put their identity on a continuum. So as I said, not everyone fits in strict categories. We now believe gender and even sexual orientation are on a continuum, lots of variations in between. And that's why there's so many terms, because people develop them trying to find something that really fits for them, because it is, again, personal. So take sex and gender, male, female, just picture them at opposite ends of a line or a spectrum. And, imagine there's a lot of other areas and, ways that you can define yourself in between. So on some days, someone may feel, a little bit more that they identify with male traits, and then other days female. Someone may feel neither on either end and fall somewhere in between. Maybe a little bit of both. And just that kind of spectrum gives people, room for everyone to fit. So again, binary choice, one or the other, male or female. Non-binary, just a person who does not identify solely as male or female. And they may not even use those words to describe themselves. Sometimes we might hear, when I grew up, we only had, there were boys and girls, nothing in between. We didn't talk about this. And that's true. It wasn't really talked about. And that led to people being left out and stigmatized. Nowadays there's lots of people identifying as non-binary. Celebrities, Janelle Monáe, Jonathan Van Ness, India Moore, and this is just to name a few. We're going to talk about a few more as we go on. But this is really increasing visibility, recognition, acceptance for people, to really be able to be their authentic selves. And we're likely to hear more about this as more people talk about it and it becomes more normal in our society. So gender identity. If gender is what sex a person is assigned at birth, then gender identity is how a person really feels internally. It's how a person sees themselves or their internal sense of self. If a person does feel that they were assigned the correct gender at birth, that's what you would call cisgender. The prefix cis means on the same side as. The majority of people report that they are cisgender, again, meaning that they feel that they were assigned the correct sex at birth. For example, a cisgender woman is someone who is assigned female sex at birth and feels that they're female. If a person does not feel they were assigned the correct sex at birth, that would be what we would call transgender. The prefix trans meaning on the other side of. Transgender is one of many terms people use to describe themselves when they don't feel that they were assigned the right sex at birth. We're using that term because it is the most common. And the flag here is a transgender flag designed by an openly transgender woman, Monica Helms. As a reminder, gender identity, or again, who you feel you are, is not linked to sexual orientation or who you're attracted to. A person can be any sexual orientation regardless of their gender identity. So let's talk a little bit more about gender identities. There are so many terms out there. You can Google them. They're always changing. They're always evolving. The best advice is don't let them overwhelm you. You are not expected to know them all. If you are working with a person who maybe uses a gender identity you're not familiar with, if it's appropriate in the conversation, feel free to ask them, what does that mean to you? For example, Sue and I may both identify as gender fluid, but it may mean something different to me than it does to Sue. We want to be really careful of our tone here. Again, if it's appropriate to ask in the conversation, if it applies to what you're talking about, it sounds a lot different to say, well, what the heck does that mean? Than if you say, can you tell me what that means to you? People in the LGBT community will be looking for possible disapproval, looking for a negative response. So we just want to be really careful of our tone, our facial expressions, of course, smiling, and just being generally friendly. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of fear and mistrust, especially in the transgender community. As of this month, February, 6 transgender women have already been murdered in the United States. And sadly, when Sue and I began preparing this training just a few weeks ago, that number was 4. So you can see how very concerning this is. You can understand why people have a real reason to be cautious. In Puerto Rico, they've declared a state of emergency due to so many murders of transgender people in the last few years. Again, people have a reason to be cautious, and we need to provide a place where they feel safe and welcome. Gender expression. Gender expression is how someone presents themselves. This includes how they walk, how they dress, how they speak, and the pronouns that they use, which we're going to talk more about pronouns in a few minutes. There's also, on the other side, gender nonconforming, or as we're beginning to call it, gender expansive. When you talk about gender nonconforming, it just sounds negative. It sounds like someone who just doesn't follow the rules. So again, the term gender expansive sort of allows someone to really own that term without seeming like, they're just a rule breaker. So someone who would be considered gender expansive is just a person who does not follow traditional expectations about how they should look or act based on the sex that they're assigned at birth. All societies have gender norms, or what people are expected to look like or behave like based on their assigned gender. Just example, in the United States, typically men wear pants, but in Scotland, men wear kilts. Every society has its unique rules. Just to give you an example, there are always people who don't follow these expectations. Throughout history, some women dressed and lived their lives as men, so they were not bound by society's expectations that were set for women. On the flip side of that, there are also people who don't want to present as a different gender. They just want to live as they feel is right and true for them. So let's think about celebrities like Billy Porter, Johnny Weir. In our society, it's much more notable for a man to identify as gender expansive because their clothing choices are traditionally more limited than women. Imagine these photos being shown on national TV and in magazines, even 15 years ago. It wasn't until around 2007 that the majority of Americans accepted homosexuality. Our norms on gender expression are rigid. It is only in recent years that TV would show this sort of content without condemning the persons involved. It is slowly changing thanks to people who are publicly asserting their independence, like those on the slide, those we talked about earlier. They're really showing independence from these rules and stereotypes and paving the way for others. And just to name a few celebrities paving the way, Elliot Page, Jojo Siwa for the younger community, Chaz Bono, Caitlyn Jenner. These are all celebrities who identify publicly as being a part of the LGBT community. And again, really paving the way for others. Just as a reminder, gender expression is not necessarily linked to your gender identity, or again, who you feel you are, or even your sexual orientation, who you're attracted to. These are all separate pieces that make up our human being. So one of our colleagues designed this human being. You may be familiar with the genderbread person or the unicorn, the gender unicorn. And we just felt that, we're not food, we're not mythical creatures. So we felt like using a human being, kind of really, really explained what we were talking about. So just to sum this up, we're going to start at the bottom. Biological sex or sex assigned at birth, sexual orientation or who you're attracted to, and gender identity or who you feel you are. And this all comes together to make up your gender expression or how you show yourself to the world. It may differ depending on the setting you're in. I look different when I'm at home than when I am at work, for example. Anyone can decide how they would like to present themselves depending on the setting that they're in. And gender expression, again, does include pronouns, which we're going to talk more about. If your gender identity matches who you feel you are for your biological sex, then that would be considered trans or cisgender. If it does not match, if your gender identity or who you feel you are does not match your biological sex or your sex assigned at birth, that would be considered transgender. I'd like to pause just for a moment here to see if we have any questions so far.
Rachel, we don't have any questions in the chat so far.
Okay, great. I'll assume that means we're doing a good job, but please don't be shy. And if you have any questions, we can definitely take them as we go and at the end. And if there are no questions for now, I'm going to turn it over to Sue.
All right, thanks, Rachel. I'm going to start off with a story. So I'm going to tell you about Alex, and this is actually a true story. Alex is the son of a friend of mine. Alex grew up in a suburb of the capital region. At a very young age, Alex decided he liked pink. This kid loved to play with dolls. He loved Barbie. His parents weren't thrilled with this. His mom was better with it than his dad, but that was their kid. They loved him anyhow. But when Alex went off to kindergarten, this poor kid became a target for bullies. He learned really quickly, boys don't like pink or play with dolls. He was bullied for years, even though he stopped saying he liked pink and dolls really soon after starting school. Middle school was awful for Alex. This bright, talented kid didn't want to go to school. Every day was a struggle. He begged his parents to be homeschooled, anything to avoid the torment. See, in a small school district, the same kids who threatened him in kindergarten were still sitting next to him in 4th grade. But both parents worked, and homeschooling wasn't an option. His parents tried really hard to support him, but the torment continued. We all know the saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. That's a terrible lie. Words really do hurt people, and kids know it and use it. Alex actually thought about suicide. He may not have really wanted to die. He was young enough, I don't think he really understood what death meant, but he wanted the abuse to stop. He actually hung out with girls because, interestingly enough, and girls get a bad rap, they weren't as vicious to him as the boys were. He even tried to date a few girls, but it didn't work out. By this point, he knew he was different. As he got older, he had to go get a physical, one of those school grades where you have to get a physical. And when Alex got teary when the doctor asked him how school was going, he saw the doctor roll his eyes. The doctor talked to Alex about getting involved with sports to toughen up and ignored his interest in theater and computers. He heard the doctor tell his parents that his life would not get any easier if he continued to act this way. Now imagine thinking you don't even want to live and hearing someone predict your future is going to be no better. His parents were actually horrified, to their credit, and they tried to find a new doctor for him. But that was really impossible. This was 20 years ago, and you didn't ask a doctor's office if they were sensitive to LGBT issues. I kind of imagine in some of our hometowns, you still don't ask those kind of questions. Anyhow, Alex worked hard to avoid all doctors based on this experience. At some point, he realized he was gay, but he didn't say much about it. Oddly enough, high school proved to be better and safer than middle school. Maybe it was because it was bigger and some of the bullies were no longer sitting next to him. And also they weren't quite as important as they'd been in middle school. He found a place to belong with drama club and computer labs, and this kid blossomed. All of a sudden he wasn't alone. There were other kids who were different and he was accepted. The bullying became a thing of the past. When Alex graduated high school, he knew where he wanted to go. New York City. He wanted to be somewhere where he could be accepted, that he would feel safe among the diversity of people living there. His parents were sad, but they recognized that upstate New York is often not welcoming to people who identify as LGBT. When Alex visited his parents one weekend from New York, he had to get an emergency care for falling on the ice. What did he do? He went to the local clinic and he lied. He presented as a straight man in order to feel safe. That's what LGBT people do when they're not sure about a place. They withhold information that might put themselves at risk. And if they have a bad experience, they don't come back. So why do I tell this story? Well, because the experience I described is not unique. Lots of LGBT people encounter hostility and discrimination in their daily lives from a very young age. They learn people will hurt you for being yourself. So they learn to look for it and anticipate it in an effort to stay safe and protect themselves. You all are in a unique position where you can affect the experience of an LGBT person in your office. You maybe aren't able to change your entire office, but you can affect your part of it. And we know that even one person who is kind and treats LGBT people with respect and dignity makes a difference in that person's life. So it's for people like Alex that Rachel and I do these trainings, so they can have a world where being different is respected, and they don't have to hide who they are or fear the responses if they're honest. And also, so they don't have to leave upstate New York to thrive. Now, the next slide that you should be seeing is a quote I found at the Center of Excellence for Transgender Health, and I just loved what it said. Words that recognize people for who they are make room for everyone to exist. That's exactly what we're trying to do with all these terms that Rachel just talked about. We're trying to make room for people to exist. Words are really small things and we underestimate their impact on people. What we say and how we say it has a huge impact. If we don't use the words that our clients use to identify themselves, we diminish them. If we want everyone who comes to us, whether working with us or for services, to feel valued, we need to use the words and names that they ask us to use. So where to start? Well, here's where I'm going to give you kind of the good news, bad news. Most studies say you have 3 seconds from a person meeting you to when they've decided if they have a good or a bad sense of you. So that means as providers, we got to make a fast, good impression. We got to start right at the start gate. So what I think matters incredibly is the visuals, because before you even open your mouth, people are looking at you and they're looking around you. So let's start with what people see. Most of us, when we're working, wear a lanyard or some kind of name tag. What kind of buttons, pins, or ribbons do you have on yours? Do you have anything that indicates support for the LGBT community? A lot of us are working in offices or we're on virtual calls. Is there a pride flag or a rainbow sticker visible? What does your background look like? Take a minute to look around you. What do people see in your space? What message do you give about who is seen, who is heard, and who is welcome there? And how would an LGBT person view it? If you exist in a community where you can be threatened, harassed, or worse for who you are, you learn to look really fast for clues that a space or a person is safe. LGBT people are looking for these clues and they're going to spread the word, good or bad, depending on their experience. I'm going to skip paperwork for just a second. We're going to get to that. But look at the posters on your walls and the magazines in your waiting room. What messages do they give out? Who's seen? Who's heard? Control what you can. And we know you can't control everything, but you can look at what buttons, flags, and stickers you have. They're a great way to start. It's a really easy way to let people know you're accepting. The flag here is the bisexual pride flag. And I do want to mention, we have flags. We have pride flags, we have transgender flags, we have the bisexual pride flags, and we're happy to share materials with you at no charge. Now let's talk a little bit about paperwork. We had your intake form shared with us, and intake forms are first impressions. When Rachel and I are working with our transgender population, we're often referring them to outside providers. If I don't know if a provider is LGBT friendly, first thing I'll do, because so many people have their paperwork online, I'll look at their paperwork to see how they phrase things. That tells you a lot about an agency. We're going to suggest on your form you ask for preferred name and pronouns and change gender just a little bit because it's more inclusive. It lets people from the start know if they can be honest about who they are with you. So now we'll show you kind of the mock-up we did of your form. Now, please don't look at the formatting. We couldn't get things to stop moving and everything moved around the form. But here's what we did. We added legal above name so someone can put their legal name. And then we added preferred name, pronouns, and under gender, we added a line for other, okay? So what we wanted to do, because Rachel showed you all those ways people can define themselves, we wanted people to use terms other than male, female, and transgender. So we wanted to broaden it out. While the formatting may not be ideal, I don't think the name section is long enough. You get the idea of what we were trying to do. We did not change a lot of your other forms because they're from New York State and you can't change those forms. But if you start off with a form like this, that's this inclusive, what you can then do when you have to pull out one of the Department of Health forms is you can say to somebody, I'm really sorry, this is a form we're required to use. It's put out by the state. We do not necessarily know, we don't necessarily have the ability to change it. People are fine with that. The other thing I'm going to say to you is bug your grant contractors at the state to make changes. We've done that. They're starting to make changes. Even if you go on, if you notice, if any of you have been on the new New York State Check Your Eligibility for the COVID Vaccine website, they now list sex for male, female, non-binary, and prefer not to answer. So we're making progress. It's just slow. So after you get through forms, you may be saying, well, names, what do we do about names? Oh my goodness. Well, here's some suggestion on names. Once you start interacting with someone, it's all about how you talk to them. So do ask someone their legal and preferred name. And here's the thing, when you get their preferred name, you need to use it, okay? Because under New York State the Gender Expression Non-Discrimination Act of 2019, once someone tells you their preferred name and pronouns, you have to use them, or you can be cited for a human rights violation. So asking shows respect. You know, honestly, nobody wants to be called the wrong name or pronouns. So just ask people. And here's the other things. If someone says to you, well, this is my dead name, know that they have probably legally changed their name and you never use someone's dead name. Also, some of the terms people use, sweetie, hun, sir, and ma'am, those can be really offensive because a lot of times what they're doing is you're using it based on how someone, quick assumption. Somebody walks up with short hair and a deep voice, you call them sir. It's not making the assumption that's the problem. We're all human. We all make assumption. It's acting on it and calling someone sir, who may be transgender or maybe like me, just a woman who likes short hair. So be careful about making assumptions. And if you're somebody who traditionally says sweetie to everybody, you may want to try and reel that back in. On pronouns, he, she, they, ze, ella. Ella is used by Spanish women. There are lots of pronouns out there. Just ask somebody what pronouns they use, and then you use them. And also the other thing I'm going to say is when you're talking to someone, think about being inclusive in the terms you use. For example, instead of using husband and wife or boyfriend and girlfriend, how about partner? Or instead of son or daughter, use child. Again, it makes it more inclusive to all people. So what do I say and how do I say it? Well, if you have an intake form that asks you someone's preferred name and pronouns, you can just, when you're meeting with them or speaking to them, you can just refer to it and verify it. Hi, my name is Sue. I see you prefer to use the name Alex and he, his pronouns. Is that right? It's a great way to start. Totally inclusive. Somebody's who's LGBT will love that. If you don't have that ability, if you don't have the intake form, hi, my name is Sue and I use the pronouns she, her. What would you like me to call you? Just ask. If you have a pronoun pin like one of these on the screen, and by the way, we have a box full of them, so if you're interested in them, let us know. Wear the pronoun pin. It can start conversations. Think of it this way. Just as we use somebody's preferred name to show respect, the same applies to pronouns. If someone sees themselves as female or non-binary, they don't want to be referred to as him. It happens a lot when we make assumptions, so just ask people. And the other thing I want to mention is realize this can change over time. Best practice is to at least annually check and make sure name and pronouns haven't changed. People get really anxious about asking these questions. They say, well, how do I ask this? People are going to be so upset about it. I don't know about you folks, but when I'm on calls lately, virtually everybody says to me, hi, my name is so-and-so, these are my pronouns. It's becoming much more common. And actually studies have found most people are fine with these questions and in fact would rather answer them than you asking about their income, because that's really uncomfortable for most of us. But here's another cheat. Actually, I'm going to flip you back for a second on that, Rachel. Sorry. Here's another cheat. When in doubt, use somebody's name and don't use any gender specific words. If I'm talking directly to someone, when I'm talking to Rachel, I don't refer to her as she, I use her name or I say you. So you don't even have to worry about pronouns when you're talking directly to someone. And just change things a little bit. Instead of saying, hi, sir, how can I help you? Hi, how can I help you? Drop the gender piece right out of there. It just makes it easier on people. Instead of saying he's on hold, Max is on hold. The link on this slide has right at the bottom, the third bullet, is a link to a resource that has very short videos on why pronouns are important, and it shows even some more videos on how to talk about pronouns with clients. So I would encourage anyone who's intimidated to try it, to go to that website, and practice makes perfect. Don't get intimidated. We'll all make mistakes, but just try it. Okay, pushback. As Rachel mentioned, you have the people who say, we never used to talk about that. So you're going to get people who say, well, why are you asking that? And those kind of people don't live around here. When we first asked our staff to start doing that, they were terrified of that. And what they quickly found was saying something as simple as, we just want to make everybody who comes to us comfortable. It would really help. It really helped diffuse the situation. We also tended to encourage staff to say to people, if that doesn't apply to you, we're just going to go on to the next question and move on. So if somebody comes in and puts their name down as Richard Johnson and doesn't fill out anything on preferred name or pronouns, pretty much Richard Johnson is making a statement that you're going to call him Richard Johnson and use traditional pronouns. Don't argue, just move the visit on. But remember also that even people who aren't LGBT sometimes prefer to use names that aren't their legal names. And we want everybody to be spoken to in the way that they want. I have a good friend who for years, we've called him Michael for years. I never knew until he submitted some legal paperwork to a friend to review that it wasn't his given name. He hated his legal name because he didn't like his father, so he adopted another name. that's not illegal to take a different name to use personally. Now, you may get the parent who says they're not going to support their child saying they're LGBT. That's the not my kid parent. Don't call him that. His name is James. Now, here's what I'm going to suggest. If this person gives you a little opening and says, I just don't understand what's going on and what this is all about, that gives you a little space to just encourage them and educate them, just a tiny bit. And I'm not saying doing anything dramatic like what we're doing today, but you could just say something like, yeah, things are changing and it can be confusing for everyone. And that just validates that parent who maybe is scared about what's going on with their kid and just lets them feel a little more comfortable. And if you can indicate then, the most important thing is that your child knows you love them. Of course I love my child. I always love my child. Their kid hearing that, every kid wants their parent to love them. No matter how good or bad that parent is, every kid wants their parent to love them. And that's a supportive piece that is nice for a kid to hear. Now, your agency's got to decide how you want to handle these situations. And as you consider your options, I'm going to put a little plug in here saying, please realize that all the studies show that gender affirming behavior from parents or adults like you, that is support of the LGBT person, hugely improves mental health and overall well-being. The flip side is also true. LGBT people whose loved ones reject them have higher rates of depression, substance abuse, homelessness, and suicide attempts. So you may not be able to change somebody's family, but you can model kindness and respect. So you might decide to see that patient alone. And when they're in the room, you might say to them, okay, I get that you maybe can't do that around your parent, but what do you want me to call you when we're alone? And that kid may admit to you that it isn't safe to call them Alexis around mom because the parent just isn't on board with it. But they really would like you to call them Alexis in private. And if you can do that, do that. It validates someone's existence. And while they're there, that kid may be looking for that sign on the wall or that pride flag and see it and feel like this is a place that is going to be safe for me. It just recognizes and affirms their existence. And that's what we want to do. Now, people always say to us, oh God, what do we not say? Because people are always worried about saying the wrong thing. So here's some things not to say on the left-hand side. Don't say, what's your real sex? Don't call someone a transgender or say they're transgendered. Real sex is the sex assigned at birth. Transgender people are persons, so call them people. I don't know if any of you heard, Governor Cuomo signed a repeal of the walking while trans law a few weeks ago. And I'm watching the TV and I'm all excited because that was a really good step. And the local news anchor said something like, this will make a big difference in the life of the transgenders. And I went, oh, these are transgender people. Just call them people. So somebody who is transitioning perhaps from female to male on the left-hand side, we call them what they want to be called. So if someone says, I was born female, but I'm a male, then they're a transgender man or they're a man. If they were born a man, but they feel they're female, they're a transgender woman or just a woman. So this is just a list of things to say or things to not say. If you're not sure what to say, don't ask. That's probably the easiest way to do it. Now, we're all going to make mistakes. You listen, we do this all the time. I talk to transgender people every day and I have to be very conscious of the words I'm using and all that. And I do this daily. So you're going to make mistakes. It's not about being perfect. So you listened and you made a mistake. First thing to know, when you make that mistake, acknowledge it. Don't try and fly by or think they won't notice. They noticed. Just acknowledge it. I called you by the wrong name. I'm so sorry. And here's the key. Move on and don't do it again. Where you lose trust is if you say, I'm so sorry, and then you continue to call them the wrong name. So just don't keep repeating it. You'll lose credibility. You don't have to be perfect, but just try. People will appreciate you trying. The other thing I'm going to say about asking questions, use a need to know basis. We don't all have to know everything. If you don't really need it, don't ask. It's absolutely fine to ask pronouns and names, but do you need other information? Sometimes all you need to know may be somebody's name. We have staff, we just trained some of our staff last week, and they, when COVID is over, hope to be tabling again in the community. And I said, you just need to know somebody's name there. You don't need to know other information. You certainly don't need to know if a transgender person is going to have surgery, has had surgery, is going to change their name, take hormones, if you're not their direct medical staff who need to know that. It's not okay to be curious or interested. This is people's lives. So please remain professional and kind. Many of these people have been really hurt in our society, and we need to show them we can be kind to them. There's another quote I'm going to talk about for anyone who's feeling like everything keeps changing. There's nothing permanent except change, particularly I think in healthcare and human services, because we're always trying to stay on top of things. So if you move into this and start working on this in your agency, there's probably going to be more and more people you're going to see who tell you they're LGBTQ. It's not that there's necessarily more people, but it becomes safer for people to tell you and be honest with you. So what I'm going to say to you is, if you say you're welcoming to LGBT people, you have to walk the walk. You can't just say it. You can't just have a flag up or a poster up and not do it. We've seen agencies who do that, and word gets around pretty quickly. They have the signs, they don't have the attitude. So it is a shift. So your forms, your environment, everything, the words you use are going to have to change. And my apologies, there's a siren going by here. So as you become known as a safe place, please expect more people to be honest about their identity. And that's going to increase your numbers. And it starts with all of us. And we appreciate you all taking the time today to join us. The next slide is our contact information. I expect that Courtney will probably share our slides with you, and please feel free to reach out to us by either email or by phone. We are happy to talk to folks. And last but not least, I did see questions coming in, and I did try and look at them, but I'm not good at looking them and focusing on my slides. So we have time for questions now.
Great. Hi, Sue. We do have a couple of questions. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can.
Okay, great. Let me pull up the questions and keep them coming. Again, the first one is, if a parent has a son or daughter in the same situation as Alex, what would be the best way for the parent to approach the school to protect their child, and have schools been receptive and supportive in your experience?
I think the support from schools probably varies by school district, but at the same point, there is big support right now on the state level of anti-bullying initiatives. So this doesn't even have to really be an LGBT issue as much as just, we know the damage bullying does to kids. So I would say to go to the school, speak to the guidance officer, the guidance counselor, talk to the school staff and say, we have a bullying issue. Schools, I believe, have to report bullying incidents to the state. So that is going to be a big issue. So talk to them and say, you got to make my kids safe. There also is a group, PFLAG, Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, PFLAG. Great website, has a lot of resources for parents of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender kids on how to work through systems. So I would highly recommend them as well.
And I can just add to that. Oh, sorry, Rachel. That True North in Glens Falls has a transgender support group for parents as well.
Yep, we refer a lot of people up there.
I also wanted to mention checking out GLSEN, GLSEN. They work directly with LGBT youth in schools. And the reason we did not share a resource slide this time is because all the resources we would share with you are on that HI resource page. So, anything that we mentioned today will be on there as well. And that's no coincidence. So definitely feel free to use it. And I also wanted to mention to whomever asked that question, the parent being involved is the right, that's a step in the right direction just off the bat. It is important for parents to advocate for their kids because not only are an LGBT community, may be facing some additional barriers, but even, there's still kids who don't have necessarily the tools and the resource that adults do. So having that adult in their life to be able to advocate for them is just, the first step in the right direction.
Thank you, Rachel. The second question is, what is the best way to handle asking pronouns? And especially if the person has no idea why you're asking that. And I know you kind of touched on it, but do you want to just kind of circle back to it a little bit since the question came in?
Sure. Rachel, you want to do it or you want me to? I don't want to hog them all. Okay, I'll take this one. I think it's just to say, lots of people, I've said to friends, because I have some friends who have said to me, they know what I do, and they said, what is all this about? Because some of you may be aware, they, them has just been accepted as a dictionary entry in the past year. And they said, what is all this about they, them? And I just said, everybody uses different ways to describe themselves. So it's just, I would just say to somebody, if they say, what's pronouns all about? Do you refer to yourself as he? Do you refer to yourself as she? Some people use them. And then just with the person who rolls their eyes and says, I'm he, okay, thank you. And just move it on. Some people want to argue it. It really isn't worth arguing.
Thank you, Sue. Also, the pronouns website that you listed, that's actually, we're going to get that on our website, but that was new to us. Would one of you, Rachel or Sue, be able to put that in the chat? That came up as someone wanted to hear more about that. And the question was, if we have made a mistake in the past with a person by not using the correct pronouns and have already made a wrong impression in their minds, what is the best way to approach it the next time when we meet them and to rectify that mistake?
I think to just acknowledge it right up front and say, I'm so very sorry. The last time we met, I called you the wrong pronouns and I apologize for that. I will try to fix it. I'm learning as I go along, but we're trying to do better. People appreciate the effort. What sometimes happens is providers tend to ignore the fact they did it. I had somebody who told me they apologized, one of our staff, she apologized to somebody and then continued to use the wrong name throughout the entire visit. And I said, you got to make it right. You got to go back and say, I just realized I blew it and I'm so very sorry. And that person actually ended up saying, thank you so much, and working with her, because it's the effort. If you are not part of this community, it seems odd and it seems hard. So, and LGBT people, they know that. So they're gonna generally be accommodating. Yes, we get the occasional person who's a jerk about it, sure. But most people, I think, are gonna really appreciate a genuine apology. Rachel, did you want to kick in at all?
No, I think that's perfect. As Sue had mentioned, we're all human, and just to give you an example, I wanted to wear my lanyard today so I could show, I have my pride ribbon, I have my pronoun pins, and I forgot it. Nobody is perfect. But the point being that, you apologize, and we've all had times when, you make a mistake, you apologize, you move on, and you make the same mistake again. You're like, oh my gosh, and it drives you nuts. But it's really important to don't keep over apologizing, over explaining. That makes people uncomfortable. You apologize once, I'm so sorry, and move on. And I can't stress that enough. A lot of times, sometimes when we apologize, we're apologizing to make ourselves feel better. And it's really important to remember who the apology is for, and it's for the other person. So apologize, keep going. The point is you're trying and you're not continuing to make a mistake on purpose.
Thank you both so much for coming today, and thank everyone who joined us. Education is the first thing, and just keep asking questions, and we're going to put an email out with the survey, with a recording, a link to the recording of this webinar. We'll also be putting out information if you would like to hear more about the mini modules. So there'll be an email coming from us. Sarah will put together. It takes us a few days to kind of edit the video down and get it cleaned up. So it probably won't be today or tomorrow, but it'll probably be, I would say, in at least the next week. We'll get it out to you. And anyone who is in this training is also going to be added to our listserv, so you hear about more trainings we're doing. So thank you all for joining us today. If there's any other questions, we still have our presenters for a few minutes. I don't see any other
Just
questions.
wanted to mention one thing really quickly that I forgot to mention is, you know, as we know, we're in Zoom now. We're always in Zoom. And I would encourage you, if you are comfortable, when you join a Zoom meeting, to rename yourself with your name and your pronouns, because that will start getting people, you know, just maybe asking you a question or, you know, help other people to feel comfortable. So if you're comfortable doing that, you know, feel free. That's just another way to kind of represent yourself when you're on Zoom.
That's a great tip, Rachel. Sorry, Sue.
That's okay. I do want to mention again that we do have pride flags, pronoun pins. We're happy to share them with you. So if you guys ever want them, let us know quantities and we'll get them up to you.
Okay, maybe we could incorporate that into the follow-up email from this, because I wasn't aware you guys had those either.
I'll include it. I'll make sure to have your information, Rachel and Sue.
All right.
Perfect.
Thank you, Sarah. And anyone that sees the signs behind Rachel and Sue, we do have those available. I had those made for one of the other trainings we did, and they're laminated. So if you'd like those, I put it in the chat, but we'll put that in the email too. We did have some
This
comments.
is Courtney. I just wanted to, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Joyce. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, it's Joyce Porter. I just wanted to just jump in and say thank you to Sue and Rachel and to you, Courtney, and Sarah for putting this together. We really appreciate it. We certainly can use all the information we can get about how we can better, you know, connect with this population. So appreciate all your efforts today. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. We're also getting a lot of nice comments in the chat. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for the informative session. Great experience. We really appreciate you bringing it to us. Wonderful information, very helpful. So guys, a lot of love for you guys in the chat too, both to me directly and also in the everyone chat. So thank you both so much. And thanks, Sarah, for being our master behind the scenes and making everything happen. We're here, but really we wouldn't be able to do it without Sarah. So thank you, Sarah. And we're going to say goodbye to everyone. Let us know. We're going to be doing some more trainings and rolling some more information out. And if there's something specific you want to hear more about we're a resource. So just let us know. And, have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.